Hello, everyone. I am Lewis. Lovely to meet you all. There's a lot of familiar faces I can see in the audience, so lovely to see you again. A lot of new people as well, so I really appreciate you all coming to this talk. This talk is all about getting into game audio. And it's, yeah, to be honest, it's going to be more beginner focused. So if you're a student or looking to break into the industry, this is a kind of talk for you. If you're already a junior, you probably know all this stuff, to be honest. So like, hopefully there'll be some kind of interesting things between everything else. But this is a talk for beginners, basically. I am interested. How many people here like are total beginners? How many people are like looking to get into the industry? I would love to know, just so I can see who I'm talking to, really, and hope you might help me with some advice I'm about to give. Yeah, if you're at university or just finished university, for instance, let me know. If you have like literally no idea anything about game audio, or you just decided yesterday I want to do game audio, then this is probably the kind of talk for you, because I'm going to go the very basics to start with. I'm going to leave no stone unturned. Okay, a lot of students. Nice, thank you. All very welcome. Let me share my screen. Actually, I'll start my presentation. Bear with me 1 second. Here we go. Can you all see my screen okay? Thumbs up. Cool. I see a lot of people trying to break in. People graduating soon. People just graduated trying to break in. Awesome. Great stuff, everyone. It is difficult to get into game audio. That is probably even number one takeaway from this talk, is it is difficult. And so if you are kind of like, you've just graduated and you're kind of finding it difficult to get into work, like everyone does, it's not just you. It's hard to get emails back. It's hard to get people to respond to you and get feedback. It is difficult, but the community is so nice, and hopefully some of the stuff will help and make it a little bit easier. But yes, it's a bit of a long-term equipment, unfortunately. But yes, anyway, as I was saying, this is a 3-step guide to getting into game audio, and I'm going to cover, in my opinion, the kind of 3 most important things. If you've done nothing so far towards getting into game audio, these are the 3 things you should do in order. So again, this stuff has been covered in other places. If you've seen gameaudiolearning.com, a lot of this stuff is on there as well. But this is going to be a short, compact guide of, here's just a guide to do, something you can work towards, I suppose. Anyway, let's get started, shall we? So I'm Lewis. Obviously, I've said that already. I'm a sound designer at Soundcuts Limited. And I've been for around kind of like 5-6 years now. I started I finished uni probably about 7 years ago. And then I kind of like did freelancing for maybe like a year. And then I started at Soundcuts, and then I went full time, and I'm here now still. And I love it. It's amazing. You may have seen me interview Adele Cutting yesterday, who's my boss. And she's fantastic. And so there's lots of information there about the company and what we do. We work on loads of different games and projects because we're an outsourcer. So we work on, we help other companies make their games, make their TV shows, make their art installations, etc. And some of the roles I do include sound design, which is probably what I mainly do, but then also music composition, because I've probably started as a composer, so I still do music sometimes. And then sometimes dialogue editing and audio implementation, which is quite a lot. There's lots of little roles that kind of like help everyone out with lots of things, but there's also lots of roles I don't do, which I'll get into in a second. And yeah, it's just some of the things I've worked on really quickly. So you might recognize some of these. The biggest game we worked on recently was probably The Quarry, which is top middle to the left. We did everything on that. We did like music editing, dialogue editing, sound design, implemented everything ourselves. Took us a long time. Really proud of it. But I worked on Shaun the Sheep, which is probably one of my personal favorite projects because it's Shaun the Sheep. It's so fun. And then a few other games here, like As Dusk Falls we did recently, which is a great game. You should all watch that and play that. Battletoads we worked on, Elite Dangerous, Planet Zoo, PC Building Simulator 2 was a personal favorite of mine as well. Anyway, so the first thing I wanted to go into was, 1 second, let me just take a sip of water before this slide. And the first thing I wanted to go into was all the different job roles within game audio, because game audio is quite a big thing. And as you can see, all these kind of roles are kind of haphazardly organized on the screen right now, are kind of lots of different positions you can have, which all differ slightly. Some of them are completely different. Some of them are quite similar with a lot of overlap. But if you're looking at getting to anything to do with game audio, like I was, when I was trying to get into game audio, I wasn't really fussy. I just wanted anything game audio. I wasn't really aware of all these roles, and also the kind of what they entailed, what the differences were between them. And so I've kind of like arranged them on this kind of grid with like 2 axes, with some like things which I wish I knew, really. So the first one on the left is how likely a job role is to be full-time employed or contract positions. And by that, I mean full-time employed positions are going to be like, you're going to be working permanently, you get holiday days, you'll have a salary, you'll have bank holidays off, you'll have job security, which is a nice thing to have. Whereas more freelance positions and contract positions, you have to be like, you have to always be networking. You have to always kind of like look for your next work. So it's a bit, you're not really sure where the next job's going to come from at the start. It can be quite stressful, but you also probably get paid a little bit more. And maybe people prefer it because you get to choose what you work on. You get to work on many things at once. You have more control, but it comes with more stress. And so from bottom to top, the roles kind of become more likely to be freelance to more likely to be full-time. So for example, a freelance composer, like if you want to be a composer, a lot of the work is going to be freelance jobs. You're going to have to be constantly kind of finding games to work on, finding things to work on, which can be difficult for a lot of new people. It's hard to get into, I won't lie. Whereas something like audio programming or like technical sound design, more likely to be the jobs you find, like the junior technical sound designer instance, are going to be full-time positions, which you'll apply for, and then you'll have a salary, and you can kind of like not worry so much about where the money is going to come from for a bit. So if that matters to you, you can kind of like roughly look at this grid I've got to see. And the other axis along the bottom is creative to technical. And I'll put these in quotes because I'm very aware that all of these job roles can be very creative. I'm not saying they're not. Please don't hate me for it. By creative, I kind of mean the things more on the left are more kind of hands-on, creating things in DAWs, performing things live, recording things, kind of like getting really stuck in the kind of stuff that personally I enjoy a little bit more, kind of actually making stuff. Whereas towards the right is it's still making stuff, but it's more things like, the programming side, the implementation side, spreadsheets, organization, direction, that kind of thing. Obviously, they can all be as technical or as creative as you want. This really isn't a hard and fast list. I've just kind of like taken every job role and arranged them in a rough pattern that I personally have that experience with. But yeah, you might find that if you're more into kind of like more creative side, something like a voice actor, composer, Foley artist, Foley editor, sound designer, there's more hands-on stuff in like a DAW rather than say an audio programmer, which spends most of the time in a game engine. Whereas the ones in the middle kind of all like blur the lines. You may have noticed there's a kind of correlation going up and to the right with this, which I found interesting. This isn't like, I'm not really proving anything with this because I've just put these on a grid, but I do think the more kind of, again, creative roles are more likely to be freelance contractors. You don't really find many full-time voice actor or composition jobs. They do exist, like they are a thing, but they're really, really rare to come across, to be honest. Whereas things like audio programmers, again, you can get freelance audio programmers and stuff like that, but they're more likely to be full-time. And so if you're sat there trying to pick a job role to go into, and you really want to have something, full-time, if you don't really know what, or you don't really care what, going for something more programmy and implementation-y might be your best bet. Whereas if you're just all about, I want to create music, I want to, do voice acting, I want to kind of like record and perform stuff, you might have to be prepared to do more contracting, which might scare some people. It might excite some people. It's up to you. Yes, just really quickly, does anyone have any questions about what any of these job roles actually are? Because I'm aware there are some which I definitely didn't know about when I was starting out. And to be honest, I only learned about in the last couple of years. I'll probably start off and say the difference between a dialogue editor and a dialogue designer, because those two are quite similar. In my opinion, a dialogue editor is someone who kind of like cleans up dialogue as it comes in from the studio. If like, say, a voice actor provides some dialogue, you'll be kind of like editing out all the clicks and pops. You'll be topping and tailing. You'll be like sorting out all the file namings and providing files for everybody. It's funny, Harvey. I did read your mind. Perfect. Whereas a dialogue designer is more the person who then takes these provided files that have been edited and cleaned up and puts them in the game, and they sort out where the dialogue should be triggering, what effects should be used, maybe something to do with localization. For example, if in the game, like one of the dialogue lines has to come through a walkie-talkie, they'll be in charge of processing the effects on all the lines that need it in Wise, etc. Any other questions about job roles here? Please do let me know. I'm just having more water. Yeah, an audio QA tester. So, in case it wasn't clear, so I'm aware that some people might not know what a QA tester is. So, QA stands for quality assurance, and it's basically games testing. I actually used to be a games tester. When I finished university, I did games testing for about like a year or so. And so, basically, a regular QA tester is just someone that, well, test the game. They have to basically play the same game a million times, a million different ways. You have to try and break the game, and they have to log everything that goes wrong. So, for instance, I remember I did a game where, like, if you were walking backwards, you could walk up a wall. And when I was a tester, like, I had to be like, all right, when doing this, you can break the game by walking backwards, and you report it to the programmers, and they can fix it for you. An audio QA tester is kind of like a subset of that, where they do testing just for audio. So this is going to be more likely in a bigger team, by the way. Like, I don't see many audio QA tester positions out there, but when I do, they're normally for big teams. Yeah, it's kind of like, again, it's testing things like music triggers work, testing things that sound effect works. If they have like a really complicated sound system, they might need someone in the team constantly kind of like trying to break it, trying to see if the implementation works, etc. So that's what an audio QA tester is. Sorry, just going through some of these questions. Yeah, an audio director is like a head of department role. So if you are getting into game audio, you're not going to be getting any audio director positions, to be honest. But I thought I'd put it on there just to show you that it is a game audio job. So, for example, at Soundcuts, our audio director is Adele Cutting, who is amazing. And she just as well as being an incredible sound designer, everything like that, video director, she also just directs all of the games we work on. So kind of she has the final say of feedback of everything we do. She tells us the direction, what she wants things to sound like, who should be doing what, etc. Technical sound design is kind of, again, so technical sound design is the more doing stuff within Wise and Fmod and the game engines you're working in. It really is a bit of a blurry spectrum, to be honest, like how much sound design work they're going to be doing. You might find some job listings which are sound designer, but it requires everything a technical sound designer needs. And likewise, you might find a job listing for a technical sound designer, but it just covers everything. But in general, the more technical a sound designer is, the more kind of like Wise stuff you'll be doing. You'll be kind of like testing systems, building systems in Wise, like kind of hooking up complicated, footstep or Foley systems or generative procedural audio systems, that kind of thing. It really can depend, to be fair. Basically a technical sound designer is like somewhere between a sound designer and an audio program. It's probably a quickest way to put it. Does a sound designer have to be a Foley artist? No, not at all. I mean, it always helps to kind of like have more strings to your bow. But yeah, you don't have to. Again, it depends. And yeah, it just depends on the positions. This is a thing. This list is very much kind of a very rough. Yeah, I don't know how I'm answering these questions before we come in. Maybe it's my time zones or something. But yeah, these are all kind of like very generic. And when you actually apply for these jobs and see these jobs listings, you'll probably see things like a job listing for a composer that actually requires sound design. It'll be confusing, So don't overthink exactly like you'll just be doing this in this role. It might kind of be broad, or it might be really specific. And again, it kind of depends on the company. If it's a bigger company, you'll probably have more specific roles. If it's a smaller company, they'll probably be a bit more broad. Because I noticed someone mentioned audio generalists earlier, and again, that does kind of cover all of this stuff. But I imagine if you're like, yeah, I guess it's kind of just like having many of these roles at once, I suppose. Anyway, I'm going to move on because I can talk about these job roles for ages, and I've got a rest of it. I've not even got to step 1 yet of my 3-step plan. So moving on. Okay, the first step is develop skills, which is basically just practice. It's really that simple. There's so many things that you can do and learn and stuff, but if you're not good at whatever you want is to do, you're going to struggle getting quite far. So yeah, the first is just practice. And so the way to do that really is I've split them into 2 separate boxes here. The first thing is just to work on projects, and the second thing is to work on redesigns. And let's go into that. More specifically. So first off, work on projects. It is amazing if you can somehow work on a game. That is like the best thing you can do to become a game audio, whatever job role you want to be. I should mention, by the way, with the job roles before, I'm going to be kind of like defaulting to sound designer for the rest of this presentation. But the advice will probably apply to most of those job roles. But I'm going to be talking about sound design specifically because I think that's what most people on Airwiggles want to do, and it is also what I am as well. So it probably helps the most, but it should apply to everything. But yeah, so working on projects, like if you manage to work on the actual game projects, it's a great way to kind of like learn loads and loads and stuff from it. You put it on your CV or resume, you can put it on your website, put it in your showreel. It's just great. It's perfect. But obviously, it's very, very hard to do. It's quite difficult to find projects to work on. So here are some tips on where you can find these projects. So the first thing I recommend is like student game projects is good to work on. If you're in uni, if it's like an actual big university, like which has a game dev course, then by all means reach out to people on that course and ask them if you can collaborate with them on games and things like that they're working on. It'll probably be for free, I imagine, if it's a student project, but it's a great way to learn. You can make mistakes in a comfortable environment, etc. So I would recommend doing that. And likewise, it doesn't even have to be if you're at uni. You can just reach out to people at universities or reach out to university lecturers being like, is there anyone on this game dev course that needs some audio? Happy to collaborate. Likewise, you could just reach out to people on Twitter. Oh my God, okay, I wasn't planning on giving this away, but this is a great tip for anyone that's looking for work, by the way. I'm diverging a little bit. If you go onto Twitter, because every tweet is public, if you just search in the search bar, like looking for sound designer or looking for composer or hiring composer and search and sort by latest, it will just give you a list of every single job listing on the website of someone looking for a sound designer. And this includes like big companies. It includes a single person being like, hey, I'm looking for a sound designer for my short film. And they might be tweeting this stuff to like 3 followers. And so no one's going to see it except for people searching for it. So that's a good tip to finding some, mixed quality jobs, by the way. So especially if you're looking for like student work or freelance work, it's a good place to start out. And likewise, you can even be more specific and be like, looking for sound London, for example, and you can maybe find stuff which is like specific to your area. It doesn't catch everything, obviously, but I'd try that out if you're looking for work. Anyway, yes, the next tip is just doing freelance work. And obviously, kind of stupid to say, the best way to get into game audio work is just start doing game audio work. But there are freelance projects out there, and it's difficult to get in. There's lots of like Facebook groups, and like someone mentioned before, like Reddit groups. Reddit/I Need a Team or INAT is a good one. There's like Game Dev Classifieds. There's a few other ones like indie games as well, indie devs. Lots of these communities of game developers who sometimes post, I'm looking for a sound designer or something. Or you can actually reach out to these people and be like, okay, again, another diversion. It's kind of like a typical thing. There's so many people that want to work in audio, and especially in music, that a lot of game developers will constantly receive emails. Like I'm talking hundreds a day, just being like, do you need a composer for your game? I'll do it for free. Let me work on your game, etc. They get it all the time. And so if you email people cold, just being like, do you need a sound designer? Do you need a composer? Do you need a voice actor? The chances are they're probably going to say no. I have friends that have done this and have got games that have released on the Switch by doing it, just like a cold email. But I feel like that's probably the exception to the rule. I think that was extremely lucky. But yeah, anyway, so like when you're reaching out to people, maybe that you don't know, if you see like a game or something on Twitter or on Reddit or something, I'd recommend reaching out to them. And instead of being like, oh, do you need a composer? Let me do it. Kind of become their friend first. Kind of be like, hey, I've been seeing this thing. I'm really impressed at this game. I really love it. I love how it's inspired by this thing. I'm really excited to play it. Give them like, establish a connection first, like, and then kind of like start saying things like, I'm really inspired by it. I quite have this audio direction for it, which I think might be quite cool. If you're interested, we can talk about it more, for instance. You can maybe actually mock something up and show them. Either way, like try to give something to them rather than just kind of like taking opportunities, like snatching, like give me a composer position. Try to make a good connection with these people rather than just sending a million blind emails out. You'll still have quite low success rate doing that, but it'll be a higher success rate than just sending emails being like, do you need a sound designer? Anyway, I'm getting really distracted. Sorry. The next step is game jam games, and game jam games are amazing. I did loads of game jams when I was starting out. I still do loads of game jams. I've done about 15 in total. And I actually I'd say when you go through my career path, it probably all stemmed from going to a game jam, because I got my first like contracting position. And to be fair, it was as a games tester, but it led to other things. My first games position was because I sat next to a guy in the pub after a game jam, and we just started chatting. And like, someone asked where to find game jams. I'll get to that. Don't worry. But yeah, so like I did a game jam. I worked with like these people all weekend. I've done a few of them at that time, and I started chatting to this guy, and then afterwards, like literally, he just offered me a job like a couple of weeks afterwards after we met. It wasn't a public job listing. It wasn't posted anywhere. It was just like, oh, I need this person. Do you want to come do it? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. So I'd really recommend doing game jams. It's a great way to learn as well, because you get to work with people, you get to work with programmers, with artists, you make connections by doing it, and you make some games at the end of it. You can make a game in like 2 days. You can't. Some of them are even like an hour long, so you can really make games and get credits for your show really quickly. It's a great way to practice, and it's probably the number one thing I'd recommend like doing to like actually do projects and do work. And then the last thing I mentioned was just make your own games, which seems impossible, but you know, if you can't find, you know, game projects to work on and you're trying to add games to your CV and stuff like that, then just make your own. It's really difficult. Don't get me wrong. I haven't made my own game, but loads of people I know have made their own games. You learn so much from doing it, and it's really is a time sink. It's not a quick fix. It's, you know, you won't be able to do it soon. It's going to take you months, years. But if you make your own game or your own project or your own app or experience with music, it's a great thing to be like, I've made this and I did the sound. Like, you learn so much from doing it. And I think don't quote me on this, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the original Slender, the 8 pages for the game, was made by a composer wanting to put their music into something, and that became like one of the most popular games of the year. Even had a film made after it. So yeah, totally. But again, that's maybe not for everyone, but it's just bringing that out there. Like, it's an option if that sounds good to you, especially if you're more into the audio programming side of things. Making your own like tiny games, it's going to be a great way to learn. Anyway, on the other side of the screen, I've got work on redesigns. If you don't know what a redesign is, it's basically the process of taking a clip from an existing game or like gameplay or a trailer or a film or something, stripping out all the audio and making it all again yourself. You're not making it like exactly as it was before, although I guess you can as a good exercise, but it's kind of like adding your own vision to whatever clip you're going to do. And so I'm assuming most people here are very familiar with making redesigns, because if you scroll on Airwiggles and look at the sound creations tab, the whole thing is full of people's redesigns they've done, whether they're practicing sound design or trying to try out new things. It's a great way to practice, to be honest. I think maybe they have a little bit of this unwanted stigma. I don't think redesigns are bad at all. I think they're an absolutely perfectly fine show like piece to put in your show later on. You learn so much from doing them. You can do them quite quickly as well. Obviously, I'd probably say if you're applying for jobs, it's more beneficial to have like actual projects under your belt that you can show people. But like, redesigns are basically just as good, in my opinion. And you can make them, they will look amazing. You can make them sound amazing. And it's just a way of saying like, this is what I can do. If you hire me, I can make your game sound this good. So just a quick note on redesigns. I think, so just like you can take recorded gameplay clips. So if you search, like, say you want to do a clip from, say, The Last of Us, go into YouTube and search The Last of Us no commentary walkthrough. You can just get whole videos you can download. You can pick a section of it and add some sound to it. I'd make it shorter rather than longer. I'll get onto that more like later on though, with like showreel building. You can take trailers and cutscenes as well, and you can also just like go onto Twitter or Instagram and just like look at VFX artists' animations they upload. People always upload like random explosions or attacks and stuff like that, and it's a nice way to just do a little bit of sound. There's loads of tips out there, and likewise, if you want to do some redesigns, then check out the March Through Sound space or the posts on Airwiggles, because we have like 31 of them which you can join in and make your own redesigns for. I will be doing it again next year as well. In terms of what software and things like that you should use, there's kind of 2 answers for this. 1, you can use anything you want, but 2, you should use these ones. And what I mean by that is like, with like, say, the DAW, people at Soundcuts use anything. Like, I prefer Logic Pro. That's my favorite DAW. We have someone that uses Ableton a lot, people that use Pro Tools, etc. But to be honest, like, if you're going to learn one from scratch, like if you're looking to start using a new one, it probably has to be Reaper. It's becoming industry standard, especially in the games industry, less so in the film industry. But there's just so many useful features about it, which you can't really ignore, I'm afraid. It's not really nice switching DAWs. It kind of makes you feel like you're rubbish again, because you don't know what to click. You know what you want to do, but you don't know how to do it. But that only lasts about a week or so of learning. So I really, I would recommend switching to Reaper if you can, but you don't have to. Like, if use what sounds best. Don't. If you hate it, then I guess there's no point forcing it. But it's probably worth giving it a go anyway and having it on your radar, because a lot of games companies are going to be requiring Reaper. I think I saw something like 60% of like game audio jobs in the last kind of like year like required Reaper. I see everyone crying about their chosen DAW not being on the screen. So I'm very sorry about that. If it helps, I use FL Studio, I use Pro Tools, I use Logic, I use Cubase. I use all of them. And I have to say Reaper probably is the most useful one. And I like to say I'm pretty unbiased. Anyway, in terms of game engines, again, Unreal and Unity are the ones that, like, if you're going to learn those ones to learn, I'd probably say Unreal is more popular at the moment. Really kind of like rough rule of thumb, which is for bigger games companies tend to use Unreal and the smaller ones tend to use Unity, but that is not final. That it really depends on the project and the companies. Likewise with middleware, learning Wise and Fmod, super useful. If you're going to pick one, I'd probably pick Wise, but this is really just my own kind of biases and experience coming in now. Loads of games use Fmod, but for me personally, like, I've never used Fmod at Sound Cuts. But that's also because we know how to use Wise, and so we push to use Wise when we can. In terms of audio editing, this one in the bottom left here is more about dialogue editing, which if you're looking at that aspect of game audio, and I'd recommend looking at either SoundForge or Adobe Audition. They kind of like, they're not really the same as Reaper, for instance. They like destructive editing. You can kind of like draw waveforms out with a pencil tool. It's a good way to dialogue edit without using RX, like Adele mentioned yesterday. And just whizzing through the rest. Yeah, for sound effects, Soundly is an amazing tool for like grabbing, like organizing your own sound effects and getting new ones. And if you need anything specific, then a Sound Effect, our partners with Airwiggles, are an amazing website with loads of fantastic sound effect libraries you can buy. Google Sheets is an incredible tool, and I really recommend using that because every single project we use ends up having like 1 or 2 Google Sheet spreadsheets, which are meticulously updated and organized. If you can just learn the basics like conditional formatting, data validation, maybe some basic formulas, it'll really help you kind of like just be organized and help you work through lists. So that's a good skill to have. And then finally, in terms of plugins, again, you can do everything with just the basic free plugins. I actively recommend against buying everything out there because we just never use them. But the ones that I personally swear by, and I think most people on the website can probably agree with, just ones to look out for. For one, Fab Filter, I think, is the best thing for the basics, things like EQ, compression, limiting and that kind of stuff. I find it all really useful. I can't really work without it. Not essential, by the way. Like, don't go buying all these things if you can't afford it. I'll go on to that in a second, actually. SoundToys is a great for creative processing. So like anything like aliens or sci-fi, I generally use SoundToys stuff for. RX is fantastic for dialogue cleanup and just like audio editing. Kilohertz has some amazing free sound effects. So if you're using Reaper and you don't like all the free plugins it comes with, I'd recommend, grabbing the Kilohertz free bundle and adding it to your library because I use those more often than the Reaper's free stuff. And then NI is Native Instruments, and that's more for music in my opinion. But I think if you're kind of getting started with music and music composition, I recommend looking at the complete libraries that Native Instruments does because it just has a whole bunch of stuff, which is really useful. 1 second. So when it comes to software, for me personally, my kind of ethos is I'll only buy something if I know I can't achieve exactly what I'm trying to do without it. I'll always try to make do with what I've got first. But if I've like hit a brick wall, like for example, I worked on a game where the main character was a fish in a fish bowl, and they emoted, they splashed around and stuff, and I needed like so much sounds to come from the inside of a fish bowl, and I couldn't figure out how to do it with what I had. Like I was trying EQ, etc. I couldn't really work it out, and I know that what was it? Speakerphone by Audio Ease had a setting which was place the sound source behind a fish, like inside a fish bowl. I was like, well, that's literally exactly what I need. It was a lot of money to buy, but at that stage I needed it. And then I've added it to my arsenal, and I can use it for future projects. But I try to only use that stuff when I definitely need to. Anyway, moving on. In terms of other skills that are useful to have, just like things to develop, things to practice. It's hard to practice these things, I suppose, but number one thing is friendliness. You have to be friendly. You cannot be mean or nasty person to work with. Again, to clarify, there are so many people trying to work in game audio. Like there's 80 people in this chat right now. It's a really, really busy industry. There's, to be blunt, there's too many people trying to get into it, and there's not enough positions going. And so if you're amazing at sound design and you've done everything right, but you're horrible. You're just not a nice person. You're rude, or you don't gel with the people that you're interviewing with. And then there's someone else that does. They're always going to pick the person they like. And I'm sure that everyone here is friendly, but it's just so important. Be as friendly as you possibly can. And there's more on that later as well. It's a good skill to be able to receive and give feedback, especially receiving feedback. If you're working in a team and when a client or your director or someone says, oh, this is good, but maybe try doing this instead, if you're like, nah, I'm not going to do that, I prefer it how it is. If you can't adjust to people's feedback, that's it's a bit of a red flag, really. You need to be able to do that. And it's difficult, to be fair. It takes some time to get used to that and learning what people mean when they say things and how to actually change things. A classic thing people will do, and I definitely did this. So someone would say, oh, this is good, maybe make it a little bit louder. And then so you make it 1 decibel louder. And then you say, oh, it's maybe a little more louder. And so you do another 1 decibel. And it can keep going. You kind of have to, learn to maybe push things further than you're expecting in other directions. And also it's good to be able to give feedback as well to other people. It's good to be part of a team and be able to kind of contribute all around to your and other people's sound design and music. And last one is organization. Super useful. Obviously, being able to get your way around the spreadsheet, being able to name things correctly, file names, etc., version control. It's going to save you so much work. I really recommend being into organization. It really helps. I don't know how you learn organization, to be fair, but it's just a good skill to have. Some other quick skills I think are useful, which maybe don't get talked about enough. The first one is music theory. I even in sound design and non-music roles, I think music theory is really important personally, because there's a few cases where it's just going to really help. And if you don't know music theory, you're going to be stuck wondering what's going wrong. So for example, if you're making some sound effects and they need to be in key with the background music, being able to know how to do that, it's quite a simple thing. This is very basic music theory, but that's going to help a lot with the sound effects. And likewise, any kind of if you collect 5 stars, and you have to have a sound which is bung, 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 knowing the intervals that you're using is going to help a lot, because there's lots of different tones and feelings you can evoke from different musical intervals. Sorry. One great example, which is from the Star Wars films, which I made a video about recently, is the lightsabers are actually built around music theory and triads. And so if you don't know what that is, basically all the protagonist lightsabers, like Luke Skywalker, all the good people, basically, their lightsabers hum a major chord. It's a 1 major third and a 5. And so when they're kind of waving these lightsabers around, they kind of they glow, they feel positive. Whereas all the antagonists like Darth Vader, etc., use a minor triad, which is a 1, a flat 3, and a 5. And so when you kind of have a lightsaber fight between a good character and a bad character, you're going to hear each on the swing and buzz. They sound different. And it's just a really subtle way of using music theory and storytelling, and just really subtly hinting, to the watcher in this case, just about, which character is good, which character is bad. It lets them know a little bit of information about them. But I can keep going on about music theory. I think it's really important. I recommend just cluing up on just basic music theory. Things like intervals and keys, maybe stuff with rhythm and the circle of fifths, but just the basics I think will really go a long way if you don't know that already. 1 second, my mouth's getting really dry. And the other thing is useful is just anything to do with game dev. So programming, game design, any of that stuff is only going to be useful when you're communicating with these people in different teams. If you can communicate to a programmer, I need you to implement the sound, when this happens, it doesn't have to be, even if it's just pseudocode, it does really help. And you don't really need to know that. You kind of learn it on the job over time, but it's only a good thing. So if that interests you, I'd recommend continuing looking down that path. If you didn't already know about gameaudiolearning.com, this is the best website to go for learning about audio and practicing and getting better. Airwiggles is partnered with Game Audio Learning because Greg Lester runs it. But I'm not saying that because I'm biased or I'm trying to get clicks or anything. I genuinely believe it is amazing. And I had nothing to do with making it, so I'm not biased at all, I promise. It's got a learning roadmap, which has everything you need to know. So I really recommend going through gameaudiolearning.com and just reading through the entire website. It's going to take you a while. There's a lot of information there. But I really recommend it. And I also wanted to shout out quickly about the new mentorships tab, which is kind of in the middle. You can reach out to any mentor you want and just ask them any questions, do a video call, get some feedback, etc. Great way to meet people and just get feedback from audio professionals. Really, really recommend it. For free, to clarify, it's all free. And someone mentioned earlier, where can you find game jams to work on? And this is one of them, the itch.io game jam calendar. Probably the biggest hub of game jams over the internet. To be fair, actually, I've not really done many of these. I can't really tell you what they're like, but because I normally do in-person game jams, like in my area. But if you're like looking for game jams actively, this is a great way to go. I think most of these are going to be online. But you know, they're all good. It's all good to work with people and get some projects done. I personally prefer the in-person ones. So I'd maybe recommend, if you're living near a city, like I used to live in Guildford, for example, and there was a Facebook group called Guildford Game Jammers. And likewise, I'm pretty sure there's a similar one in Bristol where I live now. If you live near a city, then maybe have a look on Facebook and Reddit or whatever of like kind of communities near you which might be running these things. But I really recommend game jams, totally, 100%. Okay, step number 2. I can't believe it's only step number 2 and it's been 40 minutes. I thought I'd be finished quickly. I thought I'd be done by now. I'm just rambling on. Sorry about that. Step number 2 is presenting yourself. What's the point in being amazing at sound design if no one knows it? You know, you got to be able to effectively showcase how good you are at everything. And so the 3 things you got to work on, in my opinion, the number 1 thing is the showreel. You've got to have a good showreel. I'm going to go through how to do that soon. Second tip is a website. It's good to have a website, and then obviously your CV and showreel as well. CV and resume as well. Sorry, you know, when you apply for jobs, you got to have a good one because you don't want to scare anyone away with any of these. You want to showcase how good you are. And you know what? To clarify, like all this stuff is about getting into game audio. There's so many things you have to do which aren't game audio related to get a job in game audio. Like this stuff is going to go into video editing, web design, your social media, that kind of stuff. There's a lot to do. I'm very aware it's overwhelming, but you know, there's a whole community here of people doing it together. So please do ask for help if you need it. So what makes a perfect showreel? To clarify what the showreel is, if you didn't know, it's basically you're just making a quick video showing off your sound design or music or whatever skills you have. And so typically what it is 1-minute video where it's like, you know, it comes up, bam, Lewis Thompson showreel. Then it cuts to a video clip of a game I've worked on. Then it cuts to a bit of you know, a redesign I've done. And then it cuts to a game jam project I worked on. And then it's like, to find out more, email Lewis Thompson at myemailaddress.com. So that's what you want. You want just a quick video you can send to people, and people can come onto your Twitter account or your website and they find you, and they can be like, oh, this is what this person does. And so my tips for this are, number 1 thing, in my opinion, is keep it short and fast paced. 2 reasons for this. 1, I think it's more exciting. It's like, you know, it's like a movie trailer. It's got to be punchy. It's got to be fast paced. It's got to get to the point quite quickly. It's got to intrigue people. You can't have a really slow burn of a show because it's not going to interest people as much, even if that's the kind of projects you're interested in. And also, but again, to clarify, going back to the whole thing about there's just so many people wanting game audio jobs. If you're a sound designer and you've submitted your showreel to a job application, there's probably going to be 200 to 300 more people also submitting their showreels to that job application. And so if your showreel is like 4 minutes long and it takes like 1.5 minutes to get going, the person watching it is probably going to have clicked away by then, which is a kind of like sad reality. I mean, I've never done that. I've never hired anyone, so I don't really know. But like, if you do the maths of the amount of people, like, you know, if you have 300 people sending in a 1-minute showreel and 1 minute's about as short as they come, that's still what, 5 hours of work just watching the showreels? Maybe I'm doing my maths wrong. That's going to be embarrassing if I look back at this later. Either way, it's a hell of a lot of time. So you want things to be as quick as possible. You don't want to waste any time. You know, cut to the chase immediately. You know, things can be quicker. It's better to leave them wanting more rather than to leave them wishing you finished it about 2 minutes earlier. And it's difficult to cut down your work so far. I know what it's like. I had the exact same problem. I was like, oh, I don't know what to cut. There's such a great scene. It's so long. It develops. If I cut this bit, then this will be missing. But just cut it. And whenever we do real reviews on like gameaudiolearning.com or something like that, we're always telling people to make it shorter, cut it down quicker, make it snappier. Some people, to clarify, some people do require a long showreel, like for a submission. So like maybe it's good to have one in the back of your locker, but in general, I think it's good to have a short and snappier one, in my opinion. My second tip is one we always tell everyone, which is to, okay, just I saw a question come in. I say the perfect length of time is 1 minute, clean 1 minute. I'd say you can probably go up to 1 minute 30 as an absolute maximum, but I really wouldn't. I'd try to do 1 minute. Some people literally have 30 seconds, you know, and that's great. I say when you get to 2 minutes, like it's too long, and I think people are going to start clicking away, I think. So I'd aim for a minute personally. And yes, Steve is right. When I judged the grape squishing contest we did a few months ago. We had 160 entrants for a 10-second video clip, and it took me an entire day to go through them all. So things take a lot of time. Anyway, sorry, my next tip is not to overlook Foley and ambiences, because this is just something I've found myself saying over and over and over again. In sound design shows especially, it's just, they're always lacking. A lot of people overlook them. You know, with Foley, for instance, like a lot of people add footsteps of characters walking along, but they don't add the cloth movements of like people running and twisting. If someone's wearing like a big suit of armor or chainmail, like you've got to be able to hear the kind of clunky metal with every single movement they use. That adds so much life to characters. And without it, characters just feel like lifeless and like the weird ghosts floating around on the screen. Add Foley and make it like detailed and the correct weight. It's going to make it feel so much better, and it's going to really stand out among everyone else. The second thing is ambiences. Again, ambiences aren't just a single stereo loop that go throughout everything. There's lots of resources about ambience design on there, and I can go into it more at a later date. I could do a whole talk about it, to be honest. But yeah, like you can really add more to that. If there's anything in a room which makes a noise, you can add little sound effects for it. Like for instance, in my room right now, for instance, like I've got 2 PCs on my left, I've got monitors, I've got a squeaky chair, I've got a light buzzing, I've got a window behind me with like a lawnmower behind it. Like all these things I can add to my ambiences. They're not even on the screen, but it helps kind of create the world and bed the world around you. Just seen actually someone in the chat saying they prefer reels to be a bit longer, up to 2 minutes, in which case, that's absolutely fine. I probably should have stressed this before at the start, but this is all kind of like what my opinion is. And I'm very aware that lots of this kind of stuff is maybe a little bit polarizing in the game audio industry. People have different opinions about some of this stuff, and it's kind of up to you to decide what's wrong and what's right, I assume. Yes, anyway, sorry, I'm really taking my time with this. I got to get a move on. Moving on, I think, yeah, pick genres you would like to work on. And so for this, I just mean not necessarily kind of like actual genres, but I guess it can be like, if you really want to work on horror, then, obviously pick horror clips, because when you apply for a position at a horror studio, you're going to look really relevant and like prepared for the job. But also, like, if you just want to work on something AAA, for instance, where you don't really mind what it is, pick AAA games. Whereas if you want to work on like indie stuff, then pick indie games. Fill your show with things that are relevant to what you want to do. If you don't care what you want to do, you just want to do anything, then, just try to generalize, have a bit of a mix. But if you can think of any way you'd like to kind of, narrow in on something, then I recommend doing it. 1 second. Moving on from that, I've got another tip, which is to create custom shows for each job you apply for. And so for that, I mean, when you kind of make so many redesigns and games and stuff like that, and you get all these different videos together, you can start kind of mixing and matching which ones you select for each job application. Say, for example, you have a bunch of video clips that you've worked and you've done, and you're applying for, let's say, playground games, you worked on Forza. You're going to want to make it so the racing game is in first, because it just makes you seem more relevant. It makes you seem like you've kind of like handpicked your Cheryl for this. It makes you seem like if it's between you and someone else that picked, a zombie game, they're going to go for the one that did the racing game because they know it can do racing games. And for that, you kind of have to make custom shows for each job you apply for. It's time consuming, it really is, but I think it's a good idea to kind of make sure each show you're sending to someone is like as perfect as you can possibly make it. And likewise, just the next point is constantly update your show reel. Like, it's never going to be finished. There's always more stuff to do. And each time you finish a redesign, you'll realize the one you did before sucks in comparison. At least that's what I find anyway. I'm assuming everyone else feels like that, or maybe I just hate myself. So yeah, I really recommend, because it's never done. Never have it in your head like, once I do this, I'm finished. You always want to be improving, doing more stuff. And with each redesign you do, you're going to improve so much. And then by the time you have the next one, it's going to be even better. So just keep working on it whenever you can, basically. I kind of said it before, but yeah, always put the best and most relevant stuff first. I remember reading somewhere about like someone who was a stand-up comic says the best way to start a stand-up comedy gig is to start with your best joke and you finish with your second best joke. And I think it's exactly the same for game audio show reels. You've got to start with the best and most relevant thing and finish with the best thing, the second best thing. There's no point having an amazing clip like 40 seconds in, because you can't risk, you got to assume these people are going to click away straight away. It's like, in the TikTok generation, everyone has such a low attention span. If you're not going to grab people with exactly what they want as quick as possible, it's just adding risk, which isn't really worth it, in my opinion. Next tip is redesigns are worth it. I mentioned this at the start. Like, don't think that you have to just do your own games and your own game jam projects. Redesigns are great. They're very, very welcome in showreels, in my opinion. I imagine a very small percent of people hiring junior sound designers aren't going to like them, but I think most people do. And so I really would, don't feel bad about doing lots of redesigns. If you don't have any actual work projects, just do redesigns until you get something. Keep practicing doing that. When it comes to redesign, I would say that taking recorded footage of gameplay, like actual gameplay, like the characters walking around, shooting people, driving, etc., I think that's slightly preferred over cutscenes, or like trailers, etc., just because it's more actual game audio focused. I know it's still a linear redesign because it's just like a video clip, but at least when you're breaking things up like you would in an actual game. Whereas if you're doing just like a trailer, you're basically just doing trailer sound design, which might not exactly be what they're looking for. And so if you got the choice between a gameplay clip and a trailer, I'd probably go for the gameplay clip, but it's good to mix and match a few in for variants, I suppose. And then finally, deep dives are fantastic. And what I mean by this is if you do a video where you kind of film yourself talking about like, here's how I implemented all this stuff into, Wise and Unity. Here's how I made these sound effects. Here's how I recorded all this stuff. Like, that's great stuff to include and add. It's really interesting, shows that you can do it, shows that you know your stuff. But obviously that takes quite a long time to get through all that. And so I'd recommend having a separate video for that or sneaking in at the end. It's kind of up to you. Like, I think Steve Simpson did a great audio implementation showreel recently, that one audio creation of a month on Airwiggles. That was really good. And that was like a kind of like 3-4 minute clip as like a separate thing. I thought that was a great idea. And I recommend people doing the same. All right, so I've been ignoring the questions for a second. Let me just go through and catch up. Lewis Ball asks, what do you think about transitions and video editing between cutscenes and redesigns and stuff? So this is a great new trend which has been happening. People are kind of picking their showreel clips so that they kind of like flow into one another in an aesthetically pleasing way. I mean, when you see it, it makes me smile. I think it's really good. But at the same time, like it really limits what you can do. So if you need to like switch out a clip, for instance, it might mess up your entire plan of what you've chosen. I'd recommend doing it. Like if you can do it, then it's good. But I wouldn't stress too much about the video transitions if you're like still learning sound design. Maybe when you think you've got it like really down, you can start playing around with things like that. But like it's not as important as the sound design work. But like, yeah, it's good. It does look good. It does make me smile when I see them. Someone asked about music showreels. Can they make maybe 1 minute or longer? You can probably get away with a bit longer for music showreels, but it's difficult with a music showreel, isn't it? Because it's hard. Again, you don't really know how much to show because really you should be listening to music for like minutes at a time. But they're not going to do that. It depends on the music, to be honest. I think if it's slower music pieces, you can do a little bit longer. But I would still probably try to just take smaller snippets if you can. Sorry, just going on through the rest of the questions. Sorry, there's a lot of questions. For technical sound design reels, should reels be longer than 1 minute? I think, yeah, that's fine. If you're like showing off how you're implementing stuff, and like talking to the camera, then I think, yeah, you can go longer than a minute. That's absolutely fine. But I would say for all of these reels, no matter what you're doing, like I think it's still good to try and be quick and snappy. It doesn't have to be like short, but try to be fast paced. Try to keep people engaged. If you're kind of just like sat there mumbling really slowly with loads of gaps of silence and stuff like that, it's just going to give people a chance to click away, and you don't want to do that really. Something Steve Simpson did, which I thought was great, was he added music to the background of his implementation demo, just to engage you a little bit more. Normally we say don't add music to a sound design showreel, but I thought that worked really well. Someone asked if you're keeping your reel to 1 minute and don't try to fit 10 different clips into that minute, as it goes so fast you don't know what's going on. Yeah, I probably do agree with that. I think if it's too chaotic, I'd say like if you have a 1 minute clip, you can fit around like 3 to 6 clips in there. If you're fitting like 10 5-second clips in a row, it can be a bit chaotic, but you know what, I don't think it's that bad. I think again, just snappiness is good, and just showing off as much as you can in a short space of time is probably the way to go, in my opinion. A lot of people will disagree about that. Okay, I think that's everything covered. Yeah, okay, moving on. Sorry about that, it took a long time. Oh, great. We have an example showreel. I forgot about this. So this is by Becky Street, who posted this to Airwiggles a while ago. I thought it was fantastic. And I think it's a really good kind of basis of what you should base your showreels off of. It is actually a bit longer than 1 minute. So, I'm already breaking my own rule. But yeah, I'm going to play it for you now. Also, bear in mind, Airwiggles live streams are limited to mono audio only. So this is going to be mono. I promise you, it sounds even better in stereo. I'm going to play this for you now. You can listen to it. You hear okay? There you go. So yes, I thought that was incredible. So congrats to the back here. I thought that was really, really good. And yeah, you can kind of see it's a nice mix of clips. It does move fast, even though some of the clips like maybe like 10, 20 seconds. If it is lagging, I'm sorry, that's probably just my internet. It's pretty bad. But I thought that was a good, I thought it was a great showreel. And it has like, it's just full of amazing sounds like ambient Foley, crazy alien sounds, spaceships. It's just got a great mix of everything. And it's probably more focused on like AAA studios, I would have thought. But yeah, it did the job. I believe Becky's working in sound now, so congratulations. Anyway, moving on. Again, sorry. In terms of if you've done your reel, there's some great resources for you for learning. The first one is, I'm sure you've all seen this, but if you haven't, there's a Twitch stream called Power Up Real Talk by Power Up Audio. Kevin Regami, amazing sound designer, does this live stream every once in a while. I think it's every week, where they just they review someone's game audio showreel on website, and they go in hard on it, to be honest. But there's so much great advice. You can look at other people's live streams, live reels and stuff, and get advice, or you can just submit your own and have them come to you. Would really recommend it. And likewise, we do the same thing over on Greg's YouTube channel, Game Audio Analysis. We'll post these on Airwiggles every few weeks, months, but we'll do the same thing. People submit their own showreels and we'll analyze them and give feedback live. And so it's useful for those who are submitting stuff, and it's also just useful for getting feedback if you're working on your own. Yes, it will be possible to rewatch a stream, Jonas. I'll be posting it probably tomorrow, I imagine. You can submit to these. I don't know how to submit to Real Talk. You'll have to look it up. You can submit to the reel reviews on Game Audio Analysis on gameaudiolearning.com, I believe. But maybe Greg can confirm that because he's the one who runs these live streams. What about your website then? So obviously you've done your showreel. You've got to have a website to put it on. I'll go through this quickly because I don't think it's as important, but the website just has to be really simple. Keep it simple and straightforward. Again, same as with showreel. You don't want to have loads of stuff confusing the whoever's watching it. You just want it to be simple, to the point. You don't, keep it, want it to be fast to load. You want it to be just simple, really. You don't want to overcomplicate it. So make sure your best work is playing after just one mouse click. And by that, I mean your showreel that you put on your website should be, as soon as you load up, lewisthompson.com or whatever, you want to load up, bam, the show is in the middle of the screen, you press the button, click, you're in, you're playing it. You want as little steps as possible between your best work and the user, because again, they're going to be looking for any reason to go and do something else and get distracted. I recommend keeping all text short and sweet. You don't need a massive blog post like writing about when you started, playing whatever instrument. You don't need to go into your life history. I mean, I'm not to be rude, but like you don't need to do it. It takes a lot of effort to write all those things. Just like a couple sentences is going to be fine. Anything you might want to include, that's going to be great. But yeah, don't worry about it. Just don't worry about like having out this massive website full of information. Just make it really simple. And last one is make sure it's easy to contact you. If you might have your email, have a contact form in the corner. You don't really need a phone number. I don't really think that's very useful, but an email address is going to be really useful. One thing to mention regarding like the style of your website, like the artistic direction, etc., you can have some fun with this really, because if you have a kind of, like I was saying earlier, if you like want to work on, say, horror, for instance, you want to work on horror games, you're really dying to work at like, Supermassive or something like that, you can make your website horror themed. You can make it, black with red text. You can make it stylized to the audio you want. And if you do that, it just makes you think, it makes whoever's looking at you think that this person is prepared to work on horror. This person is like all about horror. They just seem like a better fit than someone that doesn't do that. Obviously, that's like pigeonholing yourself a little bit. So it's up to you to decide if you want to do that. But if you do end up like kind of like having a little brand for yourself like that, you can use that everywhere. You can make your CV the same colors. You can use it on your business cards. You can use it on your social media accounts. If you look at my website, which is lewisthompsonsounds.com, I've got like a kind of like dark gray and yellow theme. And I use it across everything. I use it like my Twitter profile picture is the same colors. My Twitter banner picture is the same colors. I use it on my business cards. I use it on my CV. It's the whole thing, but throughout is like a branding type thing. And so like I recommend doing that. And I imagine most people watching don't really have a specific thing they want to do. They just want it to be like generic. But think about just like what yourself, if you're like a really like friendly, bubbly person, you can make it kind of like, rounded corners with like pastel colors. You can make it a bit nicer, a bit more fun. If you're like, all about, serious, big orchestral scores and gritty sound design, you can make the whole thing just a little bit more, rigid and pointed. It's a nice touch, really. It's a nice way of just adding a bit of personality to a website. Just think about it if you want to do anything with that or not. Finally, the third step, and the most important step, is networking. The big, scary networking. Networking is the most effective way to get working in audio, and you should start right now. There's no reason to put it off anymore. It is the most important thing at all. Now, you're probably wondering what networking is, potentially, if you've not done it before. It's not really like what other industries are. It's not like everyone kind of in suits gathering around talking about business deals, etc. It is just making friends. You want to make friends with people, basically. And let me explain why. So junior roles in game audio are very, very, very hard to obtain. There just aren't enough positions. And so the best thing you can do is when you apply for a job to already know someone that works there. If you already know the hiring manager, if you already know someone in the team you'll be working with, if you know someone who knows the hiring manager and they recommended you, it just gives you a leg up on anyone else. It's so, so important. For me personally, like I can put every single job I've ever gotten down through networking with someone and someone recommending me or knowing me. And likewise, I think for most people I know it's the same. You don't have to. Like I know people that have got in positions from just merit, but like I say, like 95% of people I know that work in game audio, like probably accredit at least some of it to networking, if not most of it. And yeah, the whole idea behind it is if you go to these events, you make friends with other people in audio, you make friends of game developers, you make friends of just people around the game dev scene, whether they're working in audio or not. If they're like, even if they're coming through the ranks with you, just having a network of people and friends so you can call like, your friends in audio or in games or something, they'll grow with you. Over time, over the years, they'll share like useful resources, they'll connect you with people, they'll recommend you for places, or they can just hire you themselves. It is so unbelievably useful. And there's loads of information about networking, on Airwiggles and on game audio learning. And we're doing a talk about networking next week. There's a little panel with a few of us about how to best network and where you can find networking events. It is so unbelievably important. And in terms of where to network and like how do you actually find networking events, here's some ideas for you. So the first thing is audio meetups. There's tons of these things. If you go to audioevents.org, there's a whole list of events you can go to. And if you just go to Airwiggles, you're already on Airwiggles, press the events tab. There's a whole bunch of audio events, which we always update to add audio meetups around the world. Really good to go to. Likewise, not just audio specific, but just like game dev events. There's, most kind of big cities of a game dev scene has some kind of recurring meetup where developers meet up and just kind of chat, hang out, go to the pub probably. It's good to get in with these groups, kind of get to know these people. Game jams that I mentioned before are just an amazing way to network because you meet and work with so many people. Online events as well. If you're living in a place where there's not many things in your area, there's lots you can do online. I recommend having a social media presence and coming to online events. For example, we do a meetup every month on Airwiggles called the Airwiggles Online Meetup. We did one last night, and we're going to do 3 more in Aircon. I think they're on Friday, Monday, and Friday again. Come along to those and say hi. I really do recommend it. And then also there's conferences. There's big, massive, huge conferences like Aircon right now, but also in-person ones like Develop in the UK or GDC in the US. People from all over will travel to these for a few days. They're quite expensive to go to be fair, but you don't need to buy the tickets. You can just go and hang out like outside the door saying hi to people. It's a good way to meet people. A lot of people we know do this. We do it as well, like me and Greg. I would really recommend doing this. And it's scary. I know it's scary, but you shouldn't be scared. It is just, people are so lovely, especially in audio. People are so nice. They're willing to make friends. They want to chat with you. And yeah, it's a good place to be. And so just some quick tips for networking, then how to do it really. We'll go into this more in our panel later in next week. But just a few kind of quick rules for you. Number one, do not ask people for work. Do not go to a networking event being like, do you need a sound design? You got any positions going? Blah, 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 blah. Just make friends. Work will come to you if you make friends. If you just ask for work, you're going to just polarize people and creep people out, to be honest. I know it's kind of like a counterintuitive, but yeah, you just don't ask for work. I've met people who just kind of go around handing out laminated CVs of their work and then just leaving you. It just feels rude, and I would never work with someone that does that, because I just felt like they kind of treat the whole thing as like a transaction. It's about making friends and connections. So that's the biggest thing to do. Audio meetups, I say they're more useful than you probably think. You might be thinking, if you're starting out, well, if I just go and meet a bunch of other, game audio people who are trying to get into the industry, like they're just like meeting a competition. But don't think of it like that. Think of it more like you'll be becoming friends with people and meeting people who are going to be rising through the ranks together. And also, I don't know, but maybe I don't have a figure on this, but I feel like a lot of audio jobs come from people knowing other audio people. Like at Soundcuts, we hire a lot of people who, like, someone on the team has worked with or can recommend, just like from word of mouth. I think becoming friends with like an audio group and audio people is probably equally, if not more, beneficial than becoming friends with like, programmers and artists and stuff like that. I guess it depends on what you want to do, but don't underrate it. Going to audio meetups, I think, can be super, super useful. And it's really fun to just chat about audio with people. Like, it's a really nice time. Be persistent. Networking takes a long time. It can take years, to be honest. Like, it's not a quick fix, I'm afraid. I don't think anything is. You might be lucky and you can probably like go to a few networking events and get something pretty quickly, but I imagine it's going to be a long haul, I'm afraid. I don't think you should ever stop networking. I've started maybe 7 years ago. I'm still doing it now, every single chance I can get. This is a tip that I like, but you don't have to do. When it's an in-person event, I always like trying to be the first person there and the last one to leave, basically just because it means I find it a bit awkward going into a massive group of people talking to each other. It's hard to kind of like jump in. If you're there first, the conversation comes to you. And it means you can kind of like have a better one-on-one conversation with a few people before everyone arrives. Likewise, you can do the same at the end. And it's just nicer to make a kind of more personal connection with someone if you're there when it's a bit quieter rather than if it's super busy. Don't be shy and follow up with people. If you're chatting to someone and they kind of say like, oh, here's my details, something, I'm working on this game, whatever, ask them like, next week, how's it going? How's the game going? Did you figure out this problem you're having? Blah, 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 blah. People are so nice and people are willing to make friends and people are happy to chat about themselves. So honestly, don't be shy to reach out to them afterwards on your business socials or something. Reach out to people, speak to people, make some friends, make some connections. And you know what? Why wait? But to be honest, generally, I don't see why all of you watching right now can just go onto Airwiggles, find someone you quite like, or you've been speaking to, or you're inspired by, and just message me like, how's it going? I would like to chat to you about whatever. People might not respond, I suppose, but what's the worst that's going to happen? It's just, as long as you're friendly, there's no downside to getting to know more people. So I'm issuing you all a challenge to go and message someone on Airwiggles right now or after the stream and just start a conversation and start making some connections. And I recommend doing it like as much as you can. It's good to get out there and make a name for yourself and make yourself a recognizable face within the industry. And obviously, airwiggles.com, if you didn't already know, it's a website you're on right now. It is quite useful, I think. I'm obviously extremely biased because if you didn't know, I run Airwiggles with Greg Lester. But it's a good resource, I think. It's a great place for meeting people, kind of getting advice, finding jobs, sharing free sound effects, all that kind of stuff. I'm sure there's loads of people who are new to Airwiggles for the conference. I just hope you stick around because I think it's a cool place to be year-round and it's a great place to meet people. Anyway, that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, let me have them. Let me know. I'm sorry it went longer than I thought. I thought it was going to be 45 minutes, but it's clocked in over an hour already. But I'm happy to answer a few questions. I'm going to have a quick bite of an apple whilst I'm waiting. Give me a second. Thank you, everyone. I really do appreciate it. Oh, Asbjorn, yes, I should mention, by the way, as a quick, again, nearly forgot about, we're doing a prize raffle for Aircon right now. I think it's going live at the moment. You can win a whole bunch of libraries from George Blad and Mindful Audio. You can it's all free to enter. There's a link on asoundeffect.com. If you're in the chat, Greg, can you send the link for me? That would be really useful. Maybe we're going to post about it in a second. Yeah, there's a prize draw. Going into the prize draw, you can win some amazing sound effects. So I really do recommend doing that. See if I can find a link now, actually. Where is it? Bear with me 1 second. Here we go. I'm also going to stop screen sharing. There we go. There's a giveaway link for you. Okay, right. Sorry, just answering some of the questions then. How hard is it to get a freelance gig as a sound designer? Also, is it worth it? It is quite difficult. I mean, I think getting any freelance gigs in the industry is going to be difficult. I say a sound designer is probably one of the more easy gigs to get. And I'm not saying it's easy, but I think like composition and voice acting are the ones that are like really, really difficult and rare. Freelance sound designer positions probably come up a little bit more often, but it's still difficult. Like, it's not going to be easy. None of it is easy, I'm afraid. Someone asked if it's worth getting a WISE certificate to put on your CV. I honestly, actually, I don't know. I don't have one, and I'm working in audio, and I work in WISE a lot. I imagine I probably could pass it, but I haven't ever tested myself. It's not essential, but if you've got the ability to get it, then I guess it doesn't hurt. Does it? But I can't actually tell you if it really helps or not, I'm afraid. Are there any other useful Discords for talking to people in the community? I actually don't know about Discords. There was the Game Audio Learning Discord, which is very useful, but I believe that has been kind of replaced by Airwiggles. So yeah, if you want like a community of people to talk to, Matthew McGowan, I'd stay here. I think everything you need is right here. There probably are more Discords out there, but I never really follow them. Like, I find them really confusing and chaotic. I prefer the kind of like more structured post format of Airwiggles. Let's see. I have a question for you. What should be the order for your cover letter, resume, letter, recommendation, etc.? What should come first? I don't actually know which should come first. I think you probably have to do your cover letter first in the email, then attach your resume. Yeah, I guess if you're writing an email to a job application, put your cover letter first and then just attach like a resume and list of recommendations. But I don't really think it matters that much. I wouldn't stress about that, to be honest. Any tips about how to find freelance work as a sound designer? To be honest, it's difficult. Like, there's no like magic goldmine of freelance job postings going all the time. It's hard to come across, but I'd recommend, likewise, you said, going on Reddit and Twitter, etc., trying to find jobs that way. And just keeping up with, there's the opportunities tab on Airwiggles, has a bunch of job listings. And if you actually go to the opportunity space, there's some links in the top bar, which has links like DevBrada and Hitmarket and Grackle, which have a bunch of other jobs going. And likewise, if you go into soundlister.com, which I'll put in now, they do a little monthly job roundup. Might even be weekly job roundup where they punch a bunch of jobs up. But there is no kind of goldmine of jobs out there waiting to be had. You have to kind of fight for every single one, I'm afraid. And likewise, if you're just looking for freelance work, your best bet is probably networking events and getting things which aren't being posted publicly. Yes, and as Greg said, there's a freelancer panel coming up next week as well. I believe that is everything. I think the questions have dried up, so I'll leave it here if that's okay. But thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you for listening to me rambling for an hour and 12 minutes. I can't believe I went on for that long, to be honest. But yes, I really massively appreciate it. And I hope you're enjoying Aircon. And if this was your first talk today, then do come along to more talks, because there's loads more planned. This is only like the 5th one out of like 40, so there's loads more to come. We've got some great ones later today as well. We have a live Q&A of Jean Pablo Uribe. We have Ross Stacks doing a great talk as well. Really recommend going to those ones. But yes, thank you so much for coming, everybody. I'm going to end the stream now. have an amazing rest of the week and enjoy the rest of Aircon. I'll see you later, everyone. Bye.